Greetings, Professor McKee here with our second seminar Saturdays for spring 2026 semester. And today, this week, we're going to be talking about mandating women on corporate boards and what happens when you do that. This paper is called Does Mandating Women on Corporate Boards Backfire? It's by Bian, Jingjing Li, and Kai Li. My apologies if I mangled anyone's name there. And this is a paper that was presented just back in early January at the 2026 AFA meeting. I was there at the presentation of this paper. This is very much up my alley in terms of looking at corporate governance and how that affects the company. I've done a number of research in that as well. And before I start going through the paper, I just want to kind of fully disclose, I'm going to be very critical of this paper. I think there are serious problems. I'm basically going to be putting on my referee, or my reviewer 2 hat and being very harsh on this paper. I'll try to do my best to be very fair in terms of presenting what the authors believe about it, but just keep in mind, I got a little heated sometimes in terms of thinking about how I think this paper has flaws. So I will be going through some of those things, and I have a whole slide at the very end where I walk through all my complaints about this paper. But let's get started. So there is a board quota here. California's ill-fated Senate Bill 826 mandated that publicly traded companies headquartered in California have to include a certain number of women on their board of directors. I say it's ill-fated because it didn't last very long. Courts, actually state courts in California, ruled that it was an equal protection violation because it discriminated on the basis of sex, and it was struck down after a couple years after it went into effect. There's been a number of papers looking at this because as soon as California did this, everyone in the finance profession who was involved in corporate governance got very excited because this was, all companies headquartered in California are affected by it. All U.S. companies not headquartered in California are not affected by this quota. So we have this awesome natural experiment. So there's a number of papers that looked at things like how it affects the boards of companies, how it affects company outcomes. This paper is a little bit different. It's looking at how it affected other female employees or potential employees of the company, not board members who are affected by this board quota, but everyone else working for the company. And the main idea that this paper has is that there's a backlash within the California headquartered companies is that because the company is forced to put more women on their board, the employees of the company have lashed back at California because this is being rammed down their throats, either because they don't agree with gender quotas, perhaps they paid attention to Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech about judging people by the content of your character, or whatever. They use a kind of it's called a reactance theory. It's from psychology, where if you try to force some things on people, they're going to be upset, both perhaps because they disagree with what you're forcing on them and because you're forcing them to do it and they're not being asked to do it. And so they lash back out. And so what they say they find, which I'll be criticizing a fair bit of this, is that companies are lashing out not at the female board members, but at lower level female employees. So the job ads are more masculine. They hire more women or they hire more men, or rather they hire fewer women, same thing. There's more turnover with female employees, and there's a worse female work experience. Now, I will say there is another paper that is looking at something very similar, like what happens with female employees, and they find the opposite, that there's more women employees, there's more women joining the company. So like those two papers seem to be not very much in agreement with each other. I'll post a link to that other paper, but that paper wasn't at AFA, so I'm not reviewing it. And also there's a worse female work experience. We'll get into all those details in a little bit. So where do they get their data? Well, they get the job ad data from something called Link Up, which so they can get the text of the job ad descriptions that were posted on the company's website. And so they can avoid duplication. They have copies ad for financial information. They have board X for board of director information. They have executive comp for executive information. They rely on LinkedIn profiles, some data from LinkedIn profiles to get job hiring. I've used LinkedIn profiles myself, actually, in a paper. There's the benefits satisfaction things that are coming from Glassdoor, and this is a minor thing that they throw into an appendix table, but I am familiar with Violation Tracker, so I included here. They look at labor infractions, so like the company was successfully sued for gender discrimination type things, and there's a website called Violation Tracker that tracks various both civil and criminal penalties when companies violate the law and are forced to pay up. All right, so job ads. They have a couple of approaches to determine if the job ad is more masculine or more feminine. The main approach, I believe, is they use a machine learning, which is a simple count of masculine versus feminine words. There's some psychology literature that they're using to determine what counts as masculine and what counts as feminine. And the more masculine words versus more feminine words means the job is a masculine job versus feminine job. They have some papers they cite where if a job is more masculine versus feminine, then like women are less interested in that kind of job. I did some digging into those papers. Most of those papers are not using like masculine versus feminine words. They're like fireman versus firewoman, which is a much more blatant difference. As we will see very shortly, the difference between masculine and feminine is not super obvious how they're doing it. They also use an AI model called BERT. I've seen people use BERT several times now in the last year or two, thanks to AI spreading. And it also is assessing if the ad is masculine or feminine. It's not super clear to me exactly what they're doing, so I could be wrong about this, but it looks like that the training data they're using to tell BERT this means masculine, this means feminine, is basically coming from that same list of masculine or feminine words. I'm not 100% certain about that, but my impression from reading the paper was that that's what they're doing. So how are they determining this feminine versus masculine? Okay, so I've listed out here the 5 most common feminine and masculine words in these job ads. So responsive, support, understand, commit, and connect. These are all feminine words, according to how they're classifying the ads. And lead, analyze, individual, compete, and independent are all masculine words. And they include all sorts of variations on roots. So like individual, analyze, analyzed, analysis, anything that's sort of a similar root as these words, like leader, leadership, probably would all be part under lead. Support, supportive, supporting, understanding, those sort of suffixes or maybe even prefixes added to these roots would all be bundled in the same group. And you can see here that these are pretty prevalent, and it kind of tails off pretty quickly. My issue is I'm not super convinced these are all super gender coded. I know there's some psychology literature that psychology students see these words and think women versus men versus man when they see these words. But if I'm looking at a job ad, I think that these are signaling a different kind of job. Individual versus supportive. Like clearly you're working kind of by yourself independently versus working on a team. And so there might be differences, gender differences there, but I'm not sure that it's really just feminine versus masculine in terms of just kind of ideology. I'm not super convinced on that. So I do think these words might signal a different type of job, but they're not screaming man versus women here for me. And I was expecting when I first saw this paper that they're not going to look at these kind of less obvious masculine versus feminine differences, and that they're going to look at pronouns. Okay, job ad says he needs to show leadership, or she needs to show leadership. And the way that they're assuming this, it's based on reactance theory here, that there's some sort of angry hiring managers that are mad about this board quota. I'm not sure angry hiring managers are capable of this kind of subtle changes to job ads. Everyone is capable of switching pronouns. So I would really like to see, does do they switch from he to she or other very clearly gendered words? Because some of the papers they use to support the idea of gendered job ads are like one of them I know was job ads in Spanish. Well, a lot of languages, including Spanish, almost every word is gendered. English isn't like that. Most words in English are not gendered. So yeah, like if you switch from male gendered words to female gendered words in Spanish, that's a lot easier to do that than it is in English. And so, but pronouns, we do have gendered pronouns in English. So I would really want to see, does he change to she? I mean, maybe job ads never use pronouns like that. But if they did, that would be, I think, a much easier way for the hiring manager to do this thing if they're doing it. So I would expect the hiring manager to do this more so than they would do these more subtle things. And there's an unstated assumption here, which the literature that they base this on explicitly does, which is that the jobs are exactly the same. They just change the job ad wording. So like some of these papers that they're citing, they'll say, okay, we're going to have the same job and we're going to like switch the gendered words here. So it's and then it's the exact same job. But they're looking at different points in time, before the quota and after the quota. So, this might not be exactly the same job. What if the companies change the types of jobs? I would expect the job description to change. And it's well known that women and men are not going to prefer the same types of jobs. I mean, maybe women prefer more jobs with good work-life balance, which I think many of these feminine words are kind of signaling, and these are kind of signaling it's not going to be good work-life balance. So ideally, they would have it's the exact same job, but the description has changed. Now they do try to do something like this, where it's it's the exact same job title, so they are able to address this particular concern. But my bigger issue is this: I'm just not super convinced that these feminine versus masculine words are really capturing what they're trying to capture. But assuming that you believe them, what they find is after California and post the exact month that this goes into effect, so they're headquartered in California and it's after this quota goes into effect, the share of feminine words out of all gendered words is going down. And keep in mind, I have serious qualms about this actually being, a good, accurate capturing of gendered words. So they're comparing California headquartered firms versus non-California headquartered firms that are hiring in the same zip code, because they're using these fixed effects with zip code year. So they have very tight comparisons. So in terms of econometrics, this is very solid. It's just on a big picture level, I have serious concerns. They also include tasks where they use the same job title or the same three words of the job title. So this is getting to the critique of, well, maybe these are different jobs. So same job title, they're still seeing this drop and change in gendered words. If they drop gendered jobs or dropping job-specific gendered words, they're still seeing that. And they have some additional alternate specifications here where they're interacting with several measures that might correlate with they think with a perhaps stronger negative reaction to the quota, because people are more strongly disagree with discriminating on the basis of sex. So they have something called TFE, which is Total Frontier Experience, basically a measure of individualism. And this is based on like how long your county with this zip code is in, because they're looking at the zip code level, was on the American frontier. They also look at the partisanship, so more Republican is more angry about discriminating on the basis of sex. Okay. And then a masculinity measure, also at like the county level. So if the more masculine it is, or if it's above median for counties. I believe it's a county level of demographic information there. And what they find is that there's stronger effects there, as these all have these negative coefficients. So there's a base effect of decreasing feminine words, and then that's even stronger for job ads in those zip codes for companies that are headquartered in California versus ones that are not headquartered in California. Okay, so female hiring, they have an estimate of like how much this deters female hiring of women based on the job ads being more masculine. This is an estimate based on previous papers. I'm not sure that those previous papers are truly um, can truly translate one to one, but they also look at just female hiring in general. So the kind of the smoking gun you would really want here is that these supposedly more masculine ads really are deterring more women from applying and trying to hire. And then you might see, fewer women being hired. Perhaps they're also discriminating in hiring in general, not just by subtly changing their job ads. Again, as a backlash to the sport quota. They don't have the data to see who was hired with a particular job ad. That would be really great for the authors, but they don't unfortunately have that. Data is not available. So they look at LinkedIn data to get some hiring data. So it's possible that locating the hiring to the same zip code as the job ads would help connect things, but they probably don't have enough data from LinkedIn to actually do that. I don't think you can get like the zip code of the person on LinkedIn. You probably can get maybe things like the state, but that's a much, much broader and coarser level of differentiation. What they do find that for these companies, again, headquartered in California, post the month that this goes into effect, the share of new female hires out of all new hires is going down. Keep in mind, their fixed effects are much coarser now. They're only looking at firm fixed effects, industry, year, month things. So this is not zip code level. So it's not nearly as amazing in terms of econometrics as the job ads are. They do run some additional alternate specifications on firm characteristics. So if the firms have more Republican employees, so they have more employees that can make political campaign contributions to Republicans, and if they have more male employees, it's stronger. Although I will note, like, this is pretty weak. They have a 1-star here, so this is a 10% level. Same thing here for male employees. It's only 5% level at the strongest points for the top quartile male employee. So this is not a super strong subsample test here. Statistical significance gets pretty weak for these, although it is in the right direction. So, it sort of supports their story. That firms that are at the firm level, that those firms that are kind of maybe less inclined to like a gender quota because they're more partisan Republican wise, or they have more male employees, are the ones that are seeing this negative hiring, although the base effect is insignificant and a lot of times positive. So doesn't seem like there's this huge effect here on female hiring. If there is a larger gap in the gender wage, this effect is much stronger. Although keep in mind, this is going back to the job ads. Fair share of feminine words out of all gendered words. So this is a different firm characteristic. We're going back to job ads, and it seems like there's more feminine words out of all gendered words for these guys when they have a larger gender wage gap. All right, so next thing they look at is employee experience. So there could be a backlash in terms of hiring and job ads, but also there are currently female employees at these companies, or people who are going to be hired, even if they're hired at smaller rates. Might their experience be worse? Because again, the people are mad about this gender quota, and so they take it out on people who have no relation to California and California legislature by doing, making things worse for female employees. Well, the authors look at employee dissatisfaction using Glassdoor. I've seen a number of papers use Glassdoor. It's quite a useful source. And Glassdoor reviews on the company, and they look at 8 amenities that they say are female friendly, and those 8 amenities get more negative. So the spread between pro and con, positive and negative reviews gets worse. And the ratings of things that maybe women care about more, like culture and values, work-life balance, they get worse at the Kansas, at the firm level because they don't have zip code things here. The problem is, especially with these 8 amenities here, like the word frequency that when they show up in the job reviews, are things that I'm not really sure are actually going to be um, female friendly. When I saw this, I thought, oh, they're talking like how often does maternity leave come up? Because that's clearly something that women are going to care about much more than men. Or lactation rooms. Again, women are going to care a lot. There are specific things because of biology that women are definitely going to care about a lot more than men. And those would be, and if those benefits suffer, then that's again a pretty clear smoking gun that there is a backlash going on. But the things they are doing are things like paid time off. That's in the first one in their list of 8. Everyone cares about paid time off. And I went through the entire list of 8 things. All of them are things that I would care about, and I'm not a woman. I think men and women would care about all the benefits they're talking about. Perhaps women would disproportionately care about some of those things, although like paid time off, vacation time, like these are things that a lot of men are going to care about too. And they explicitly didn't include things like maternity leave, which are clearly always going to be women. Now, they don't have the gender of the reviewers. According to the discussant, you can actually get the gender of the reviewers. So like authors should totally do that, and then they don't have to worry about this problem of is this amenities actually capturing women complaining about benefits, or is it, or if it's men complaining about benefits. You can just only look at the female reviewers and see what they say, and then if it's worse and compare it to the men, then you have much stronger results here. They also look at employee violations. Note that this is table G7. This is an appendix G. This is very deep in their paper, but I'm interested in it because this is about like legal penalties, and that's something I've done a lot of work in. So they look at violations that are recorded in the violation tracker, and this includes a variety of civil and criminal penalties. Usually civil. Most penalties are civil, not criminal. And they see violations increase for treated firms, and they're looking at a list of, like, they call it seed words. These are words that are listed in the description of the violation that the company committed, and they say, well, this is a gender related violation. Well, I looked at the list of seed words. The words were female, gender, hostile, hours, leave, sexual, support, and vacation. Now, I think some of these fit quite well. Female, obviously. Gender discrimination, that's probably going to be female discrimination. Sexual discrimination, sure. Those 4. I have zero concern about that this is actually capturing mostly female discrimination against female employees, but a violation in terms of hours and leave, that's not gendered. I don't think that's really gendered very much, and they would definitely need to prove it to me if I was reviewer too. Support, vacation, hostile, again, like all those things. Hostile is probably coming from hostile work environment. That could be gendered. It also could be like a racial hostile work environment too. So like you haven't separated those 2 out. They expand their word list, and they now have applicants, women, job, positions, discrimination, environment, medical, sick, and harassment. It's like, okay, so again, there's women, maybe harassment, although again, racial discrimination could be in there too, but like sexual harassment is probably what it's talking about. But things like medical, sick, and hostile work environment, job, positions, like there's a lot of non-gendered violations that they're going to be picking up with these words, because they're saying there's more infractions that are gender related. Some of these are sexual discrimination infractions. Some of these are sick leave, violation of sick leave policy. Guys, those 2 are not the same thing. You really should just focus on these specific words like female, sex, sexual, gender, women, maybe discrimination, although like there's a lot of lawsuits over racial discrimination, which would be captured there too. So they could do this a lot better. I suspect it doesn't work if you only use the handful of the words that are really tightly focused on what they're trying to find. Probably because their sample size will drop a lot. I bet their sample size drops significantly, and they don't have very many observations for things like just female, just gender, and by including hours and leave, they get a lot, but those things are kind of ambiguous in terms of if they really capture gender versus some other, whether it's a woman who is being harmed by this violation or if it was a man who was harmed. They also look at employment terminations. And this could be you got fired, this could be voluntary, could be kind of forced out, so quasi-voluntary, quasi-forced. They don't know. This is again based on LinkedIn. But the share of females in employee terminations is also increasing. All right. The next thing they do, which I'm going to criticize quite a bit as well, is they run a survey to try to test this reactance theory, if this is the actual channel. So they tell half of the respondents to imagine their company has a gender quota for board members, and then half of them are told that they have a purely meritocratic board hiring practice. Then they asked about their reaction to that board hiring practice. Unsurprisingly, the people who are told that there's a gender quota get annoyed. And the reasons they give are inconsistent with the reactance and norm violation reasons. So like they're annoyed that this is being forced on the company, and they're annoyed because they don't like the norm that's being forced on the company. Okay. And they take that as like, yeah, we're supporting reactance. The problem I have with this is word selection matters a ton when you're doing surveys. You can radically change results just by changing the wording. And I read the wording because they credit to the authors. They included the wording here. So the first one, which is there's a quota, says the company you work for follows a government-enforced gender quota policy that mandates a specific percentage of women must be included among its board members. And there's some additional things that are not relevant. The one that says it's meritocratic says the company you work for follows a recruitment policy that prioritizes selecting candidates based on their qualifications, professional experience, and how well they align with company's goals. This policy applies equally to all positions, including both leadership and non-leadership positions, blah, blah, blah. These are not otherwise identical except for the government-enforced gender quota policy. Keep a note how Company 1 doesn't say that they have a meritocratic policy except for the government-mandated quota. Meanwhile, Company 2 says this is how we hire for everyone. It's meritocratic. It's based on how qualified you are, your experience, how aligned you are with what we're trying to do for this company. They're not identical. The wording of Company 1 does not say, oh yeah, we're meritocratic except this annoying government quota on our board. Otherwise, we're fine. So I'm not convinced that this negative reaction to board 1 to survey 1 is capturing what they think they're capturing, because their wording of the survey is not actually that similar. There's clear differences in how both companies are presented. Company 2 is presented as being very meritocratic. Company 1 is not. It could be meritocratic, but they don't actually explicitly tell you like they do for Company 2. Okay, enough about that survey. Again, I've done some papers where we do surveys. Like, we agonize really hard over exactly how to word everything because we know how important it is to word it right. And I think they kind of messed up. They have all sorts of additional robustness checks in their appendices that I have not gone into. Again, I showed you an appendix from table G, appendix G. There's a lot of appendices that starts at A and goes up through G. It's very well polished paper. Now, I'm going to put on my referee hat. I'm going to say some things that I've already said, but I would really like to see some of these things. Job ads, look at pronouns, he versus she. I really don't trust this supposedly gendered word list that authors are using. Part of it is economists being snooty towards other forms of social science because we use math a lot more than they do, but also like so many things don't replicate in all fields, our field and their field too, the psychology field. So, I mean, he and she are just such an obvious thing to look at. Why aren't you looking at that? Something that the discussant suggested, which I think is a great idea, they should totally do this, is look at hiring high up in the org chart. Because right now that's any job ad. And what they're saying is that there's going to be a backlash. Like, say you're a hiring manager, you're 6 levels down the org chart. You have never met anyone on the executive team. You've never met anyone on the board. You don't live in California. You live in South Carolina. And somehow you are angry at this gender quota and you're going to lash out. Why would you care? But if you are one level down from the board and you work with the executive team and you know board members and you know that someone you work with is going to get fired because you need to hire a woman instead of a man. So one of the men has to be kicked out the door to meet the quota. I think you're probably going to be more likely to be upset because someone you personally know is being negatively affected by this quota. That seems pretty plausible to me. So I would expect to find a stronger effect if this reactance and being angry is actually a thing. So that'd be a good thing to do too. They should get the actual gender from Glassdoor instead of relying on benefits that are very questionably female coded. With violation tracker, again, they should get only things that are very clearly sexual and gender discrimination oriented. And lastly, this was struck down by the courts as a violation of the Constitution of equal protection several years after this happened. So did this backlash reverse when the quota was eliminated? Because basically, if you're angry that this is being rammed down your throat, well, the court said, yeah, this is no longer going to be rammed down your throat. We are yanking this quota. So we stopped this quota. And those would be a number of my suggestions. As reviewer too, they would hate me because I'm telling them to do all sorts of additional work, and really, I'd probably recommend rejection because I don't think they can really succeed with this. So to conclude, authors are claiming that there's backlash in job ad description, in hiring, and workplace treatment of women because of this California's board quota. And my big issue with this is it's really hard for me to believe, despite their really strong econometrics, that hiring manager in South Carolina or North Carolina, somewhere outside of California, I misspelled Carolina because I was so angry when I was typing this. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Would really care so much about doing these things. Some of these things are outright illegal, like the violation tracker stuff. And discriminating on benefits against women, that would be illegal too. It's just maybe a little harder to prove. Like you're saying that they're going to be so mad that, again, about this norm violation of being meritocratic, that they're going to like start discriminating against women because of that. I find that hard to believe. One, that they would care very much about the board, and two, that they would decide to start doing outright illegal things, because all of the prior examples that they use of reactance behavior, as far as I can tell, they seem to be a reaction to a direct imposition. So like, okay, you are a member of the hiring committee and you were told you have to hire a woman. And so you're mad about that being forced on you directly. And so you're less likely to hire women, or less likely to, there's some, backlash against that because it was a direct imposition on you. But like, it's not directly affecting these hiring managers. They're not on the board. So this feels like a big extension of reactance behavior, far beyond what other literature has previously found. And that's a big jump for me to believe. It's hard to believe that. So a lot of some of the reason I went so hard into all these not as major critiques is because just the main story of hiring manager in South Carolina, Florida, whatever, way down on the org chart, has no direct impact on them. This person is going to do these subtle changes, outright illegal changes, that you have to really, that seems like to me like a really hard story to sell, at least for me. Maybe other people believe it. The discussants seem to be very positive on this paper. I can see why, because there's a lot of great econometrics here, but I think the overall story has some problems. Fortunately for the authors, I am not going to be reviewer 2 for them, because they're going to be submitting to top journals and I am not going to be the referee at a top journal. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of critical review of the paper. If you did, please comment, like, and or subscribe so others can find this video too. And next week, we will continue with some papers. I have a whole bunch of great papers from AFA that I want to review. I saw them. I was really excited about them. I got excited about this paper too. And I'll see you all next week for our next paper.